The northern countries of Europe face very different climatic conditions to, say, France, Germany or Spain, or indeed England. Therefore, they have to look at different ways of dealing with responses to remote and rural major incidents. Our weather conditions make things very difficult to respond over long durations.
These challenges are not unique to northern Scotland. They occur throughout Europe's northern periphery. 4 partners, Scotland, Sweden, Finland and Iceland, form the core of an effort to improve responses to disasters and accidents in remote and rural areas. The project is called CoSafe, Cooperation for Safety in Sparsely Populated Areas.
What we hope to come from this project are a number of things, but principal amongst these are to learn from our partners how they manage disasters in their areas and see what we can learn to manage our disasters better. Part of this process will involve the development of new products and new services for management in particularly difficult environments. The kind of things we're working on here are clothing, transportation and electronic means of communicating during major disasters.
As part of the project, key rescue and emergency personnel from these countries were invited to Stornoway in the Outer Hebrides. They were there to exchange ideas and share experiences. It was an important opportunity to further the aims of CoSafe to deliver swift and effective responses to those who find themselves in an accident or an emergency in Europe's northern periphery.
Many of the lessons that we need to learn cannot be seen elsewhere in the UK. So we are committed to actually looking at best practice elsewhere, to working with colleagues through the CoSafe programme, through the Northern Periphery programme, to look at how countries such as Finland, Sweden, Iceland, similar challenges to us both in terms of the environment but also in terms of geography, in terms of lack of resources, how they've actually addressed the issues of dealing with critical incidents in those environments.
But Scottish emergency teams have important lessons to pass on too. Every year, climbers and walkers have to be rescued from our mountains and hills. Some simply get lost, others are the victims of falls, avalanches or medical emergencies. Working in sub-zero temperatures and dangerous weather conditions requires specialised skills and judgment. And rescue expert and mountain guide Mick Tighe gave the Stornoway conference an insight into the techniques used by the mountain rescue teams and the specific difficulties they face.
I'm trying to explain the difficulties of getting people out of difficult places in very bad conditions, and where we very often don't have doctors. We very rarely have the ability to use technical gadgets, if you like, for first aid or anything, because we're cold, we have mittens on, our casualties possibly need very complex medical treatment, but we can't give them that treatment on the mountain. And our job is to give them the minimum amount of medical treatment to get them stabilised and then basically get them out of there.
Others stressed how, through the work of CoSafe, they'd become aware of just how much expertise and how many resources were available in small rural communities, resources which could then be harnessed and coordinated to ensure emergencies and accidents are effectively managed.
The key thing really is looking at your own local area and trying to work out your own local solution to the problem. We have in Abbeymoor a little emergency response plan just for our valley, basically, and it's based on the services and the resources that we know are available, so that although we hope we will get backup help from Inverness, there is a chance, for example, the road could be blocked and that resource can't arrive quickly, if at all. But nevertheless, we know where our oxygen is, we know where we have spinal boards, we know where we have intravenous cannulas, we know where we have pain relief, and that's all part of our plan.
The importance of such planning was underlined by conference guest Sandy Matheson, Lord Lieutenant of the Western Isles, who highlighted an infamous maritime disaster of the past. At least 205 islanders returning from the Great War perished within sight of their own homes when an Admiralty yacht hit rocks and sank off Stornoway. These days, rescue workers do all they can to avoid the confusion and communication difficulties that impeded their forebears who went to the aid of the stricken yacht.
The only way it can be achieved properly in terms of saving lives, in terms of preventing a waste of time, effort and resources is pre-planning. And that is why I think this conference was so valuable, in that we not only saw that substantial pre-planning had already taken place, but that new issues were arising which required attention and can only get attention through the pre-planning stage. So planning is an essential prerequisite, and if that costs money, so be it.
One highlight of the CoSafe conference was a film of the rescue of 14 Spanish fishermen by the Coast Guard helicopter based at Stornoway.
I think the spinning deal is the type of incident that's a high risk for most organisations. To have something so far away from your normal base of operations and in such bad weather conditions.
The crew were trapped aboard their vessel, the Spinningdale, after she was washed against the cliffs of the islands of St Kilda in a ferocious North Atlantic storm.
The vessel was tucked right in beneath the cliff. The waves were washing over the back of the vessel, and it actually looked to us at that point that it was going to capsize. He was firing flares right tucked in the bay in St Kilda.
It was quite initially hard to pick the boat out. There's quite a few fishing boats taking shelter in that area. The original position put it about another mile to the east from there, which at the time we thought, well, that's not too bad. But being stuck underneath the cliffs, and it was also the crew were getting very, worried at this stage. They were saying, we need to get off now.
For the Coast Guard, that was a challenge that was essentially beyond what they would normally expect to have to deal with, and yet they coped with it fantastically. Primarily down to having the right equipment and definitely having the right people.
The Stornoway Conference was one of 2 major gatherings organised every year by CoSafe members. These events offer those involved in major incidents a welcome chance to exchange ideas and experiences.
I learned about new bits of kit and new bits of ways of delivering drugs that I hadn't known about. Also to learn the mountain rescue thing, a lot of that's environment we don't tend to work in. And of course hearing from a nurse in the front line in the Western Isles, so it was really good to hear that.
It's always interesting to get information and ideas about how it is for others, as it were. I think the multi-agency and multinational cooperation that the CoSafe project allows is useful for just joined-up thinking, if you like.
But the overriding aim of the CoSafe conference was to learn from the past, to look at incidents and emergencies which have already happened in remote areas, and to work out ways of improving aspects of the responses, exploring how to work together more effectively and to make conditions less hazardous for those in the field.
I think if we're looking for messages from the conference, then probably the most important one is that whenever there is a major disaster, cooperation between the different agencies in managing that disaster is absolutely fundamental to getting a satisfactory outcome. And this is something which, looking at the way different agencies work in different countries, will help us particularly here in the Western Isles.
The CoSafe programme, the Northern Periphery programme, is a small but effective programme that challenges the thinking of people like me, allows us to actually work with colleagues, to work with academics, researchers from other colleagues in similar environments across Europe, in particular Scandinavia, to enable us to learn those important lessons.
The conference that I saw, I thought was successful in all of those terms, but it also reassures our community, and it gives confidence to the rescuers themselves. They know what they're doing.
Remote and rural is not seen as being as important as urban work due to the population differences. But when things do go wrong in these areas, it's important that we've looked at them and we can find a way to make sure that people are safe in that environment.